Our lunch keynote speaker, John Elder Robison, really does not need an introduction among this audience or beyond. John is one of the leading global voices on disability rights and inclusion and has been a leader in this field for decades, since John's groundbreaking publication of Look Me in the Eye and his subsequent series of books. John has continued to be an important voice, a crucial voice, and has extended his talents and efforts to various governmental and non-governmental agencies promoting disability rights and inclusion across the United States and across the world. So it's an honor and a pleasure for me, and I, on a personal level, want to thank John. You've been a friend to myself, a friend to Turo, and we are so pleased to have you with us once again.
I'm always here. I'm always glad to come down and join you.
Thank you, John.
And I want to say to you all that, Sam and I met about another area of interest of mine. You know that, I don't know if you do know, but some of you probably know that I'm the Neurodiversity Scholar at William & Mary. And I've been that since we established the first neurodiversity program at a major university in North America. It's about 15 years ago now. But in addition to being the neurodiversity scholar, I'm also an Anglican scholar there, and I'm the scholar in honor of a distant great-grandfather who was one of the first Virginia people to be trained and the first member of the Virginia trained faculty. They distinguished the Virginia faculty by calling them the scholars when the British instructors were the masters. And of course, that was at a time when the British were the masters before the Revolution, when we kicked our asses out and stood up for ourselves, which is essentially what I have advocated for autistic and neurodivergent people for a quarter of a century now. It's hard to believe that. And Sam and I came to be friends after he began researching the question of whether Joseph in the Old Testament might have acted the way he did because he was autistic. And indeed, the more you look into the writings in the Old Testament that describe him, you see on the one hand that Jewish scholars say, well, his behavior may be inscrutable, but who are we to question it? And an autistic person like me looks at that and they think, boy, it's just the same stuff I would do. I could understand getting into trouble. I could have got sold into slavery. I could have gotten thrown in a pit. All that stuff, absolutely. It could have happened to me and I would have done all the same things. And it's just striking how ordinary those behaviors are to someone like me. And you know what's really powerful about his book is this. It doesn't matter if you believe in the Bible. It doesn't matter if you believe in any of the characters. All that matters is that you accept that the Old Testament is a very ancient work of literature. And given that it is such an ancient work of literature, the manner in which autistic behavior like me is casually described, means that behavior such as I and many of you exhibit in our daily lives was so common as to be recognized in the ancient world. And if you think back to what people have said about our community, there were no autistic people 20 years ago, there were no autistic people 50 years ago, notwithstanding I am obviously more than 20 or 50 years old, people denied our existence, and yet right there in the Old Testament, we have descriptions of our people. And I think that's a really, really important thing, and that's really drawn us together and came up with this conference. I've always been a proud person to be part of it, and I'm here now. I'm also here on kind of a first outing. Those of you who've seen me before, you didn't generally see me dressed in these suspenders, right? Now, you might have heard that my great-grandfather was first county agent in Gwinnett County, Georgia. And he was a lifelong farmer, and of course farmers wear suspenders, and you might think that, well, I've got suspenders in his honor. And I wish I could tell you that that is true, but the actual reason I have suspenders in his honor is that I'm wearing pants that are 6 inches too big for me, and if I took my suspenders down, my pants would fall off, and the reason my pants would fall off is I'm wearing these loose pants because it's just 3 weeks ago that they took my cancerous prostate out of me. I never in a million years would have thought that I would get diagnosed with a cancer and then operated for it, and frankly, I would have never imagined that I would even make it into my seventh decade of life. But here I am, and it is a remarkable thing, and I'm thrilled to join all of you here today. So, a recent New York Times story asked why there's such an increase in disability accommodation requests in colleges and universities. Reading beyond the New York Times article, some colleges now have 40% of students receiving accommodations. At elite schools, Harvard and the University of Chicago, for example, both had no more than 3% of students on 504 plans a decade ago, and both schools are over 20% today. In Western Massachusetts, where I live, 34% of Amherst College's students are currently registered as disabled. Not all of them receive accommodations yet, but the point in registering as disabled is to get accommodation. That is a striking change over the last decade. A few towns to the west, Williams College reports the same thing. 5.5% of students receiving academic accommodations in 2023, and over 20% in the current year. The scale of those numbers and the trend line that they follow go beyond being descriptive of minorities needing special treatment. When you start to read numbers like 40%, you see that today's disability accommodation asserting population is more properly described as an emergent majority. At 40%, even if we hold at 40 and we don't surpass 50, that is still a big enough number that an overhaul in how college services are defined and offered needs to change. And the change that needs to happen is to recognize that 40% isn't a minority that you grudgingly help. 40% means everyone. So services are no longer a thing you grovel and get tested and get qualified to receive. You don't fight for them. They are things that everyone receives. And that speaks to the heart of the current criticism of DEI initiatives in this country. 40% of students wanting accommodation in a college? Absolutely, 40% means everyone. And to exclude people who can't qualify and can't get it, you're absolutely right to say throw DEI out the window. Throw it out the window and replace it by giving all of these accommodations to everyone. That's just a really, really important thing. And if you take away anything from that New York Times article, I would urge you to really think strongly about that. But also, I would say, consider why this is happening and look at some of the accommodations that people ask for. One of the most common accommodations is extra time taking tests. And among college faculty, that's a pretty controversial thing. If the goal is to allow students to get better grades, then obviously giving them more time to complete the test will accomplish that goal. But if you're a professor who believes that hitting another goal, doing a job within a time limit, is as important as providing a right answer, then you might think, no, I don't want to give extra time because the point of this test is I believe a skilled person or a knowledgeable person should be able to do it in an hour. Now, you can argue that some people truly can't do it in an hour and they can be accommodated. I don't disagree with that. But again, I would say we have to recognize that in many careers in the working world, the idea time is of the essence has meaning. Not everyone might do every job. And it's really hard to know what to do given that situation. Might we ask, is one reason that students ask for extra time on tests not their ability to do it, but the concern for the perfect GPA. The idea that you are a failure in an elite college if your GPA is less than 4.0. How real is that, folks? The idea that your GPA is 4.0 statistically means that none of the rest of you in the room could have achieved that exalted number. And yet, if we go to Harvard Law School, 90% of you sitting out here have that 4.0 GPA. How can that be? The median GPA in Harvard Law actually isn't 4.0. It's 3.96. And how does that fly when people think about the grades of Harvard students? If the median GPA in Harvard Law is 396, show me some universities where the median GPA is 1 something or 2 something. They don't exist. This is like, what was that television show, Prairie Home Companion, where all the men are handsome and the women are pretty and all the children are above average? Well, that's what it's turned into. All the college students are above average. And it becomes meaningless. Educators have created a disconnect in pursuit of perfect grades. Those students may be good, but they do not go out into the world and deliver perfect work. There is an overabundance of evidence that recent college graduates are the farthest thing from perfect in America's skilled workplaces. That's not a criticism of the intellectual abilities of college graduates, simply a recognition of reality. It just can't be. So, if you look at the working world, we can say that work deadlines are a close analog to time limits, and most of us do face deadlines at work. Now, there are some jobs where accommodations are not possible. You can't, for example, ask for extra time if you get a job working on an assembly line. I would hope that if you graduated from Touro Law, you would not find yourself having to take work on an assembly line for General Motors. But if it happened, well, accommodation requests won't work. There are other situations where you have intellectual deadlines. If you become a lawyer or a CPA and you're working on tax filings, well, that's a hard number. You can't just turn it in the next day. And there certainly is some merit in teaching people who want to go into those lines of work to be able to hit the deadlines. But I don't know that that's really everyone. It's true in the working world that a superior work product delivered a little bit late is often preferable to a lousy work product delivered on time. Most of us who have had careers for some years have seen that firsthand. And that argues for the meaninglessness of time limits in college for most people. It might actually argue for the opposite of more time on tests. It might be that if a student in the law school here, or a student in the business school, or a student who is studying finance, if that person wanted to be a tax accountant, or that person wanted to be in a job where there would be hard deadlines, that person might choose to be subject to time limits, where another person who works in a field like I do, where time limits, frankly, don't matter, they take a second place to quality, that person would say, no, I don't want the time limits, I want to take all the time I need. And that should be a reasonable choice everyone can make. It doesn't have anything to do with your disability, it doesn't have anything to do with any of that. It has to do with where you see yourself going in life and the relevance of that particular thing. In the working world, if you're self-employed, as I am, you choose to meet a deadline or you just say no and you live with whatever the result is. When you're in charge, you may lose a customer, but you won't lose a job. And that's how I have lived my life. Whether it's coming and speaking, it's writing books, it's writing other things, it's my work restoring cars. What matters is that we deliver a product that wins. Delivering a product next Tuesday does not matter at all. We can look at other things where I think it's really questionable. What about requests for assistive devices? College professors are rightly concerned that if they allow people to have smartphones and other implements with them, they're going to turn to ChatGPT to answer the questions, and we don't know if they can do it or ChatGPT can do it. But you know, again, when you're out in the working world, nobody that you're working for is going to care if you turn to ChatGPT and you get some insightful, clever answers for a report you're writing. Now, what will get you in trouble, it'll get your ass fired, is if you turn to ChatGPT and you copy a bunch of incorrect drivel into your paper and you make your employers look like fools. That will absolutely cost you your job, as it should. And it should be the same if you don't use ChatGPT and you write a bunch of incorrect drivel and you lose your job over that. The fact is, using ChatGPT and getting correct answers and laying them out in an insightful, readable way, that's a legitimate work skill. So how should we see that in college? I asked that question because I truly don't know the answer. When I came down here today, I rode down the car with my old friend Bob Jeffway. He's sitting back there. He's another geek like me. Bob and I grew up when we navigated by reading maps. And we memorized where we had to go, and we did it. Well, we can't do that anymore. Now, Bob's sitting there while I'm driving, and he's looking at the phone, and we're trying to figure out, do we follow the sign that says Ferry Street, or do we follow the phone which says go 4 more miles to this other exit? And so now, we're all guided by that. We've all thrown away our ability to navigate. Are we worse off because we abandoned that cognitive skill, or are we better off because we never have to wonder how to get to the place we're going? Those are hard questions to answer. And people with different areas of knowledge can have really different perspectives. I don't really know how all these accommodations ultimately relate to work in later life, but I do know, as I just said to you, that I can cite an example for just about any accommodation you could name for me, where someone in a college would say, no, I don't think we should do that because it fosters cheating, it fosters grade inflation, whatever. But I could say to you, well, being skilled doing that thing will also be rewarded in the workplace. So it's not clear-cut at all. People say that 40% means that a great many students up there, oh shit, it failed on us. Well, maybe the AV person can have us pardon me here. Yeah. You want to start it over again?
Yeah.
I know we're here in an esteemed venue where everyone is polite and all that, and I'm never polite, but you all probably are used to that in me. So let's see, we'll get this going again. All right, well, it'll start up by and by. You might wonder what the relationship of these pictures may be to what I'm saying to you, and the answer is that I know in these kinds of conferences you see many slides that are made by professional slide creators, and there are all sorts of words for you to read, and they read the words to you. And as interesting as that may be, I thought, well, maybe just seeing some images of my life and the places I go would be an interesting diversion for that. So there is no connection between what I am saying and what you are seeing back there. Other than these are all pictures I've taken in my travels. So, it's, yes? Oh, okay. So people question then the legitimacy of so many people asking for accommodation. And I have no doubt that some people absolutely need an accommodation, and you could say their motives are completely pure. Others may indeed be trying to game the system to get better grades. Does that constitute cheating? I'm not sure it does. And if you feel that your life is going to be ruined if you don't get that 4.0 grade point average, can we say that even if you call that behavior cheating, can we say that that's wrong because you may see it as a survival strategy? It's a really hard question, and it's a mess that we've created. If I may go back to my polite language with this 3.96 bullshit, it just isn't real, and when we tell everyone that they have to aspire to it to have a hope of getting anywhere, we've created a monster. So, I'd also like to speak to another issue that stands behind this huge surge in accommodation requests, and that is that Gen Z represents the current population of college students. Bob and I both have children who are in this Gen Z cohort, and now we're getting grandchildren that are going to grow up in this. And Gen Z is coming of age in a very difficult time. Houses are no longer affordable. The idea that our children will have finer homes than we have is probably not real. The upward mobility that they will enjoy seems to have vanished. We live with a threat of war. Artificial intelligence threatens to make many undergraduates irrelevant soon, if it hasn't done so already. And the difficult job prospects for graduates are likely to get worse. Now, if you're running a Starbucks or a Home Depot, you might celebrate that. But I don't think very many people who graduate from this university are going to be the least bit enthused at having to work there because they can't find anything else. And that's a big problem. Colleges also have their problems, and many people question their value, but nobody questions the benefit of what we call the right education obtained at select institutions. But can you get in? Once in, can you make the cut? At my own school, William and Mary, we have a 22% acceptance rate for our law school. 4 out of 5 applicants don't make it in. And of our applicants, almost all of the ones we accept ranked in the top 10% of their high school classes. But once you get in, you're not home free. Once you're there, it's hard to stay on track. And with all that competition, you always know that there is someone else waiting to take your place. There's somebody else who's ready to be the top person in class, somebody else who's going to pass you in the class ranking, someone else whose GPA is more perfect than you, and every step you take down the class ranking and the GPA ladder, the dimmer your prospects for a future get. And that's a horrible, horrible way to live in school. The pressure is intense. It shouldn't surprise any of you, just as it didn't surprise me when studies of our student body showed that the number one mental health problem faced by our students, and I can say with confidence that it's true for your students and most other good university students, is anxiety, and depression follows close behind. Now, we have talked a long time in the neurodiversity community about how having a disability in reading other people's body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, or intent sets you up for being anxious. If I look at you and I can't tell if you're smiling because you think I'm a fool or you're smiling at me because you think I'm sweet, and I say the wrong thing, I'm going to feel terrible. Maybe you're going to get mad. Maybe I'm going to get in trouble. It's a real serious problem for people who have a disability that makes them anxious. And of course, being anxious and having social failures, what does that do but over the long term? Make us depressed. But this, folks, this business in good colleges today, this goes far beyond the problems that we talk about in the neurodiversity community. Because for me to say that, well, many autistic people suffer from anxiety, that's a true statement. But that still only represents 1 in every 25, 30, 35 people in a room. It's not most of you. But if I'm talking to a class of undergraduates here in this university or in any other good university in the country, most of you suffer from anxiety simply because you are here, because of the pressure that you are under. And it's not just the school, it's your parents. Your parents are telling you that if you can't do this, you're not gonna go anywhere. Maybe this push for these good grades and good jobs is more harmful and destructive than anyone ever thought. It certainly was not this way when Bob and I were getting jobs. When Bob and I went out into the job market, and this was as engineers seeking professional jobs, there was no notion that a 4.0 was required to get you in. You got a job if you passed college. In my case, I got a job if I didn't even go to college. You can't do any of those things anymore. That's all gone out the window. So you might ask, do things get easier when you do get this vaunted job that you were looking for? Do things get easier if you go to work at Google, Microsoft, Ernst & Young, Goldman Sachs, Bridgewater, Tesla, or any of the other elite companies that your graduates and the graduates of many other elite schools apply to find work at? I have actually had the honor of speaking before audiences in all those places. And I would say with considerable certainty that the answer is no. The pressure does not go away. It just becomes different. Now, instead of thinking you're going to flunk your class and get set back, now you have to think about, well, am I going to screw this deal up and my employer's going to lose $100 million? Am I going to screw this deal up and the SEC is going to find out and they're going to fine us? Am I going to screw this up and they'll put me in jail for something? You have even more pressure, and it never relents. And that was not the case before. And when you look at that pressure, you really have to, oh, we're out of time? All right, well, I'll get out of here as quick as I can. You have to ask, is something that you call cheating wrong if it's a strategy to survive? Sam, we started 30 minutes late. Can we go a few more minutes? All right. Thank you. You all are good with going a few more minutes, right? Yeah, okay. Well, then we're going to... All right. With no disrespect to you back there with the hook trying to yank me off the stage, I will hurry. I spent 17 years helping guide government agencies through philosophical deliberations about questions like these: what's right or best for policies around neurodiversity and support for disabled people? This is not a question about what we do for disabled people. This is a question, folks, about what is right to do for all people. I'm here today to tell you that the disability accommodations you have grown up fighting for, benefiting from, advocating for yourselves, for your children, for your friends, that whole concept should go out the window, because you should not have to fight tomorrow. Those things that you fought for are properly made entitlements when you come to school. And to the extent possible in a workplace, they should be available if work can work with the requested accommodation. We are in a time when I agree we should throw out DEI, not because its principles and values don't matter, but because DEI is not a thing for the few. It is a thing for the many. It is a thing for everyone. And if it's a thing for everyone, it doesn't have a name because it's how we live our lives and it's what we do. It's part of our central values. So, having retired from that work, I still have my teaching, I still have my scholarship, and I know these are hard questions to solve. You listen to the media every day and you hear simple answers, angry social media statements. These people are cheating, these people are screwing things up, these people are stealing. And you know, nothing in life is ever that simple. There are very few absolute answers. There are very few absolute truths. If you're a person of faith, you know that the local rabbi, the local parish priest may believe in absolutes when they talk to you. But if you ever went into seminary, if you ever study theology, you know well that the theologians are well aware that there is a broad range of nuance. Absolutes simplify governance, but acceptance of nuance is what opens our minds to discovery and moves the world forward. All possible college accommodations can be carried into the workforce if we own the workplace and make the rules. I have stood for years talking about how you, me, all of us can act the way the neurotypical world expects so that we can find success in jobs. In response to that, many of you have risen in rebellion and you say, this masking to pretend to be someone I am not is destructive to me. What am I going to do? Well, if we're a minority and we want to get along with the majority, we have to figure out how to do that. I never ever have advocated for pretending to be someone you're not. But would I advocate for learning how to behave in a way that makes you acceptable for your own success? Absolutely. Absolutely, I believe that. And I think that, again, if this becomes a thing for everyone, oh, you're advancing on me. Well, if this becomes a thing for everyone, it's no longer a matter of what do I have to do to learn how to behave acceptably to you. Because I'm just as valid when I say, what about you? What are you going to do to be acceptable to me? It's a two-way street, right? And that takes us to the idea that I believe can replace neurodiversity and DEI, and that is this idea of neurotypes. There is a general acceptance in society that some people are very emotionally sensitive and intuitive. Other people are very logical and rational. It's not a great leap from that to say that this person can read your feelings, this person has no clue what you're thinking, but this person knows all about how to solve that complex problem that has you stumped. And it's a good balance, right? You can each do things the other can't do. And if we recognize neurotypes, which are a fact of life, they aren't majorities, they aren't minorities, they don't say you're better or they just say that you all have different abilities, as do I. If we recognize that and we learn to just put people in places by our own choice or maybe by job offers where we can do best, we're going to have a better world. So I would like to say to you that if we move from where we are now to a recognition of neurotypes, and we do say good riddance to DEI as an institution, and we welcome the universal introduction of accommodations everywhere they work, which means they ought to work fully here at universities, and they ought to work where the jobs make it possible in workplaces. That is the dream that I hope this next generation can pursue. And the final thing that I hope all of you will think about is what can we do as a society to relieve the unreasonable pressure that we put on Gen Z? How can we help the people coming into college from not suffering, from not killing themselves, burning out in school, dropping out of school? Those are all new problems created by us. How can we collectively fix that? This isn't a thing about a small disabled minority. It is a thing about everyone. And how can we do that all together? That's what this is about. It's about doing this all together. And that is my message for you. I was going to ask for questions. We don't want to do that, right? Oh yeah, she's getting aggressive now. So I am going to slink off here. But what I will do is I'm not going to go back to the ferry for a little while. And Bob and I will just head out here in front. And if any of you want to talk to us, you have questions, I'll see you all out there. So thanks so much for joining me here. And I hope this is of some value. Okay, you think?
Perfect. Thank you, John, once again for a very thoughtful, very entertaining, and very thought-provoking presentation. I'm going to now ask the panelists for our first afternoon panel to approach the podium, please.